Arab millionaire adopts a janitor's niece, despite his son's hatred, unaware that years later. The blood was still on his hands, but Khalid swore he hadn't planned this. So how did it come to this? The cold night air wrapped around him like a shroud as he stood in the dimly lit alley, the distant wail of sirens echoing in the background. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat a reminder of the chaos that had just unfolded. The metallic scent of blood lingered in the air, mingling with the dampness of the pavement beneath his feet. Khalid glanced down, his breath hitching in his throat, as he saw the crimson stains on his hands. He wiped them frantically on his trousers, but the evidence of his actions wouldn't wash away so easily. He had always been a man of reason, a respected businessman, known for his sharp mind and gentle demeanor. But tonight everything had changed. The shadows danced around him, whispering secrets he wished he could forget. He had come to this alley to confront a man who had threatened his family, but he never intended for it to end like this. A sudden noise made him jump, a scuffle, a cry for help. Layla. The thought of her sent a jolt of panic through him. Where was she? Had she seen? He turned, his mind racing. He had promised to protect her, to keep her safe from the dangers of the world. But now, as he stood there, he felt the weight of his failure pressing down on him. The sirens grew louder, drawing closer. Khalid knew he had to leave, but his feet felt rooted to the ground. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The shadows seemed to close in around him, and he could almost hear the whispers of betrayal in the wind. Then a chilling thought struck him. What if Layla was in danger? What if the very people he had tried to shield her from were now coming for her? He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. He had to find her. He had to make sure she was safe. As he turned to leave the alley, a figure emerged from the darkness, blocking his path. Khalid's heart raced as he recognized the man, the very one he had come to confront. The man's eyes glinted with malice, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "Looking for someone?" he taunted, stepping closer. Khalid felt a surge of anger and fear. He had to protect Layla at all costs. But how could he do that when he was standing on the precipice of his own destruction? Khalid was once a respected businessman, known for his sharp mind and gentle demeanor. But appearances can deceive. Beneath the polished exterior lay a man haunted by the choices he had made. He had built a successful life, but it had come at a cost. Layla, his niece, had come to live with him after the tragic loss of her parents. She was a bright girl, full of hope and dreams, but the shadows of her past loomed large. Khalid had taken her in, believing he could provide her with a safe haven, a chance to start anew. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to realize that the darkness he had tried to escape was creeping back into their lives. The Al Farouk estate, with its grand architecture and lush gardens, was a symbol of wealth and success. Yet within its walls, tension simmered. Zaid, Khalid's son, had never accepted Layla. To him, she was an intruder, a reminder of the family he had lost. The resentment between them was palpable, and Khalid felt caught in the middle. One evening, as they sat around the dinner table, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. Layla picked at her food, her eyes downcast, while Zaid shot her glances filled with disdain. Khalid tried to lighten the mood, but the weight of their silence hung heavily in the air. "Can you pass the salt, please?" Layla asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Zaid rolled his eyes, but Khalid intervened. "Zaid, be polite." The tension at the dinner table was suffocating, but Khalid hoped that time would heal the rift between his son and his niece. However, that hope shattered the moment Zaid slammed his fist on the table, causing the silverware to rattle. "Why do we have to keep pretending she belongs here?" Zaid spat, his voice laced with anger. "She's just a charity case, a reminder of everything we've lost." Layla flinched at his words, her eyes welling with tears. Khalid felt a surge of protectiveness for her, but he also recognized the pain in Zaid's voice. He was struggling to cope with the loss of his mother, and Layla was an unwitting target for his grief. "Enough, Zaid," Khalid said firmly, his voice rising above the tension. "Layla is family now. She deserves our support, not your scorn." But Zaid wasn't finished. "Family? You think she's family just because you took her in? You're just trying to fill the void left by Mom." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Khalid felt the sting of truth in them. He had taken Layla in out of a sense of duty, but he had also hoped it would somehow mend the fractures in their family. Instead, it seemed to deepen them. "Maybe if you spend more time getting to know her instead of pushing her away, you'd see how much she's been through," Khalid shot back, his frustration boiling over. Zaid stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to listen to this!" He stormed out of the dining room, leaving Khalid and Layla in a heavy silence. Layla looked down at her plate, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Uncle Khalid. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Khalid reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on hers. "You haven't done anything wrong, Layla. You're not to blame for his anger. He's just hurting." But deep down, Khalid knew that the real trouble was just beginning. That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that their fragile family dynamic was on the brink of collapse. The next morning, Khalid received a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was frantic, filled with urgency. "Khalid, you need to come to the office. It's about Layla." His heart raced as he rushed to the office, dread pooling in his stomach. When he arrived, he found his assistant, Sarah, waiting for him, her face pale. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "It's about a photograph we found in the archives," she said, handing him a file. "It's Layla's mother. There are connections to some dangerous people." Khalid felt the ground shift beneath him. The very foundation of his life was crumbling. He had taken Layla in to protect her, but now it seemed he had unwittingly brought danger into their home. 4. Rising tension. 14. 19 minutes, 1,200 to 1,500 words. The photograph was grainy, but Khalid could make out the familiar features of Layla's mother, Fatima. She was smiling, but there was something unsettling about the image. A group of men stood behind her, their expressions dark and menacing. "Who are they?" Khalid demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor. "They're part of a criminal organization. Fatima was involved with them before she passed away." Khalid felt a chill run down his spine. He had thought he was giving Layla a fresh start, but now it seemed her past was catching up with them. "We need to protect her," he said, determination flooding his veins. As he left the office, Khalid's mind raced with possibilities. He had to confront Zaid and explain the situation. They needed to come together as a family, but he feared Zaid would only see this as another reason to push Layla away. When he returned home, he found Zaid in the living room, his expression dark. "What's going on, Dad?" he asked. His tone, Khalid took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. "We need to talk about Layla," he said, his voice steady but urgent. Zaid looked up, his brow furrowing. "What now? Is she in trouble again?" "Worse," Khalid replied, his heart heavy. He gestured for Zaid to sit down. "I found something at the office. Something about her mother." Zaid crossed his arms, skepticism etched on his face. "What does that have to do with us? She's just a burden, Dad." "Layla is not a burden," Khalid snapped, frustration boiling over. "She's family, and she's in danger. Her mother was involved with a criminal organization, and they might come looking for her." The room fell silent, the weight of Khalid's words hanging in the air. Zaid's expression shifted from anger to confusion and then to fear. "What do you mean, in danger?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Those men in the photograph, they're dangerous. We need to protect Layla at all costs," Khalid explained, his tone softening. "I know you don't like her, but she's just a girl who lost everything. We can't let her face this alone." Zaid looked away, his internal struggle evident. "I don't want to be a part of this," he muttered. But Khalid could see the conflict in his eyes. "Whether you want to or not, you are part of this family," Khalid said firmly. "And family looks out for one another. We need to come together, or we risk losing everything." As Khalid spoke, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the moment Zaid would finally understand. But just as he thought that, the doorbell rang, shattering the fragile peace. Khalid exchanged a worried glance with Zaid before heading to the door. When he opened it, he was met by a tall man in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. "Khalid Al-Farouk?" the man asked, his voice low and steady. "Yes, that's me," Khalid replied, his heart racing. "What do you want?" "I'm here to discuss Layla," the man said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk about her mother's debts." Khalid felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, debts?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Your niece is in over her head. We need to settle this before it gets messy." Zaid stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. "Who the hell are you? Get away from my father!" "Stand down, Zaid," Khalid said, holding up a hand. He turned to the man, trying to keep his voice steady. "What do you want from us?" The man smirked, a predatory glint in his eyes. "Just little cooperation. Layla needs to pay her mother's debts, or things will get very complicated for all of you." Khalid felt his stomach drop. "You can't threaten us like this. Layla's just a child." "Child or not, she's tied to this mess," the man replied coldly. "You have 48 hours to come up with the money, or I'll be back. And next time, I won't be so polite." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving Khalid and Zaid in stunned silence. "What just happened?" Zaid asked, his voice trembling with anger and fear. "Layla is in danger, and we have to protect her," Khalid said, his mind racing. "We need to figure out a plan, and fast." The next few hours were a blur of frantic phone calls and desperate attempts to gather information. Khalid felt the weight of the world on his shoulders as he tried to navigate the treacherous waters of Layla's past. "Why didn't you tell me about this sooner?" Zaid asked, pacing the living room. "We could have done something." "I didn't know," Khalid replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "I thought I was protecting her by keeping her past hidden. I never imagined it would come back to haunt us like this." Zaid stopped pacing and turned to face his father, his expression a mix of anger and confusion. "So what now? We just sit here and wait for them to come after us?" "No," Khalid said, determination hardening his resolve. "We need to confront this head on. We can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to protect Layla." Just then, Layla entered the room, her eyes wide with concern. "What's going on? I heard shouting." Khalid exchanged a glance with Zaid, who looked away, clearly still grappling with his feelings. "It's nothing you need to worry about, Layla," Khalid said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're just discussing some family matters." But Layla wasn't convinced. "I can tell when something's wrong. Please, just tell me the truth." Khalid sighed, knowing he couldn't shield her from this any longer. "Your mother had some connections. People who are now looking for you because of debts she left behind." Layla's face paled, and Khalid could see the fear creeping into her eyes. "What do you mean? What kind of people?" "Dangerous ones," Khalid admitted, his heart aching for her. "But we're going to figure this out. We'll protect you, I promise." "Protect me?" Layla echoed, her voice trembling. How can you protect me when you don't even know what they want? Khalid felt a pang of helplessness. I'll do whatever it takes, Layla. We'll find a way to settle this. Just then, Zaid spoke up, his voice low and serious. What if we go to the police? They can help us. No, Khalid said sharply, the thought sending a chill down his spine. If we involve the police, it could escalate things. We need to handle this ourselves. Layla looked between them, her eyes wide with fear. What if they come after me? What if they hurt me? Khalid stepped forward, taking her hands in his. They won't. I won't let that happen. We'll come up with a plan, and we'll face this together. But as he spoke, a nagging doubt crept into his mind. Could he really protect her? The weight of his promise felt heavier than ever. That night, as Khalid lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The clock ticked ominously, each second a reminder of the 48-hour deadline looming over them. He had to find a way to gather the money and protect Layla before it was too late. The next morning, Khalid received a call from an old friend, Rami, who had connections in the business world. I heard about your situation, Rami said, his voice grave. I might be able to help, but it's going to come at a cost. What kind of cost? Khalid asked, his heart racing. Let's just say it involves some risky business. Are you willing to take that chance? Khalid hesitated, weighing his options. He knew he was treading dangerous waters, but for Layla he would do anything. I'll do whatever it takes, he said, determination flooding his voice. Meet me tonight at the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. We'll discuss the details, Rami instructed before hanging up. As Khalid prepared to leave, he felt a mix of fear and resolve. He was stepping into a world he had tried to avoid, but he had no choice. He had to protect Layla, even if it meant risking everything. The sun dipped below the horizon as Khalid drove through the winding streets toward the old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The weight of the evening pressed down on him, a heavy cloak of anxiety and determination. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Time was slipping away, and with it, Layla's safety. As he pulled into the dimly lit parking lot, he spotted Rami leaning against a rusted pickup truck, his silhouette outlined by the fading light. Khalid stepped out of the car, his heart racing. You're late, Rami said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. I had to make sure no one was following me, Khalid replied, scanning the area for any signs of danger. What do you have for me? Rami motioned for him to follow, leading him into the warehouse. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of oil. The shadows danced around them as they moved deeper into the building, and Khalid felt a shiver run down his spine. Here's the deal, Rami said, pulling out a folder filled with documents. I can help you raise the money, but it's going to involve some unconventional methods. Khalid frowned, his instincts screaming at him. What do you mean by unconventional? Rami leaned closer, lowering his voice. There's a shipment coming in tonight. If we intercept it, we can sell the goods and make enough to cover Layla's debts. But it's risky, and if we get caught... I can't put Layla in danger, Khalid interrupted, his heart pounding. There has to be another way. Listen, Khalid, Rami said, his tone serious. This is the only option we have. If you don't act now, those men will come for her, and you won't be able to protect her. Khalid felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had always prided himself on being a man of integrity, but now he was faced with a choice that could compromise everything he stood for. Yet the thought of Layla in danger pushed him forward. Okay, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. What do I need to do? Rami outlined the plan, and as Khalid listened, he felt a mix of dread and determination. They would need to move quickly, and he would have to rely on Rami's connections to pull it off. As they prepared to leave, Khalid's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his heart sinking as he saw Layla's name on the screen. I have to take this, he said, stepping away from Rami. Layla, he answered, trying to keep his voice calm. Uncle Khalid. I'm scared, she said, her voice trembling. I heard someone outside the house. I think they're looking for me. Panic surged through him. Stay inside and lock the doors. I'm on my way home right now. Please hurry, she whispered. And the line went dead. Khalid! Rami called, urgency in his voice. We need to go now. Without another word, Khalid sprinted back to his car, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He couldn't let anything happen to Layla. As he drove back, his mind raced with thoughts of how to protect her. When he arrived home, he found the front door ajar, and his heart dropped. Layla, he shouted, rushing inside. The house was eerily quiet, the shadows stretching across the walls like dark fingers. Layla, he called again, fear gripping him. He moved through the living room, his heart pounding in his chest. Just as he reached the kitchen, he heard a noise, a soft whimper coming from the hallway. He rushed toward the sound, finding Layla huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror. Uncle Khalid, she cried, rushing into his arms. Thank God you're safe, he said, holding her tightly. What happened? I saw a man outside. He was watching the house, she said, her voice shaking. I was so scared. Khalid felt a surge of protectiveness. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you. But as he spoke, he knew they were running out of time. The men from Layla's past were closing in, and he had to act fast. Get your things. We're leaving, he said, his voice firm. We need to find a safe place until we can figure this out. As Layla nodded, Khalid felt a sense of urgency wash over him. He had to protect her, no matter the cost. But deep down, he knew that the danger was only just beginning. The tension in the air was palpable as Khalid and Layla hurriedly packed a few essentials. Khalid's mind raced with thoughts of the men who were after them. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that danger lurked just outside their door. Where are we going? Layla asked, her voice trembling as she stuffed clothes into a small backpack. I don't know yet, Khalid admitted, trying to keep his tone steady. But we'll figure it out. Just trust me. As they finished packing, Khalid heard a noise outside, a low rumble of engines. His heart sank. We need to go. Now, he urged, grabbing Layla's hand and leading her toward the back door. Just as they reached it, the front door burst open, and a group of men stormed in, their faces obscured by shadows. Khalid's heart raced. Just as they reached the back door, the front door burst open, and a group of men stormed in, their faces obscured by shadows. Khalid's heart raced as he instinctively pulled Layla behind him, shielding her from view. Khalid al-Farouk, one of the men shouted, his voice dripping with menace. We know you're in here. You can't hide from us. Khalid felt a surge of adrenaline. He had to protect Layla at all costs. Stay behind me, he whispered urgently, his mind racing for a plan. The back door was their only escape, but he knew they wouldn't make it if he didn't act fast. Search the house, the leader commanded, and the men fanned out, their footsteps echoing ominously through the halls. Khalid glanced around, searching for anything he could use as a weapon. His eyes landed on a heavy vase on a nearby table. He grabbed it, ready to defend his niece if necessary. Layla, listen to me, he said, his voice low but firm. When I say go, you run out the back door and don't look back. I'll hold them off. No, I'm not leaving you, she protested, her eyes wide with fear. Layla, you have to trust me, he insisted, his heart breaking at the thought of putting her in danger. You're the most important thing to me. I won't let them take you. Just then, one of the men spotted them. There they are, he shouted, lunging toward them. Go, Khalid yelled, shoving Layla toward the back door. She hesitated for a moment, fear etched on her face, but then she turned and ran. Khalid swung the vase with all his might, smashing it against the man's head. The man crumpled to the ground, and Khalid felt a rush of adrenaline. He had to buy Layla time to escape. Get him! the leader shouted, and the remaining men charged toward Khalid. He fought back with everything he had, using the vase as a weapon, but he was outnumbered. "Khalid, look right from the doorway. Our voice is filled with panic. What are you doing? We have to go. Just go," he shouted back. His arm pounding as he struggled against the men. He could hear the sound of footsteps approaching from the front of the house, and he knew they were running out of time. With a final burst of strength, Khalid managed to push one of the men back, creating a momentary opening. "Run, Layla!" he yelled again in desperation, lacing his voice. Layla hesitated for a heartbeat, then turned and bolted out the back door. Khalid felt a surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The men were closing in on him, and he had to find a way to escape. Just as he was about to make a break for it, the leader grabbed him by the collar, yanking him back. "You think you can protect her? You're just a washed-up businessman." Khalid felt a surge of anger. "I may be a businessman, but I'm also her uncle, and I will fight for her." With a swift motion, he elbowed the man in the gut, breaking free from his grip. He dashed toward the back door, but just as he reached it, he heard Layla's voice calling out from the darkness. "Uncle Khalid, where are you?" "Layla," he shouted, panic rising in his chest. He couldn't let them catch her. He burst through the door and into the night, his heart racing as he searched for her. "Layla," he called again, his voice echoing in the stillness. He could hear the men behind him, their footsteps pounding against the ground. Suddenly, he spotted her crouched behind a bush, her eyes wide with fear. "Over here," she whispered urgently. Khalid rushed to her side, pulling her close. "We have to go. Now," he said, glancing back to see the men emerging from the house. They sprinted into the darkness, the cool night air rushing past them as they ran. Khalid's heart raced, not just from the exertion, but from the fear of what might happen if they were caught. "Where do we go?" Layla gasped, her breath coming in quick bursts. "Just keep running," Khalid urged, leading her toward the nearby woods. He knew they had to find a place to hide, somewhere the men wouldn't think to look. As they reached the edge of the trees, Khalid turned to Layla. "We need to stay quiet. If they find us, we won't be able to escape." They ducked behind a large tree, their hearts pounding in unison. Khalid could hear the men's voices in the distance, searching for them. "Split up!" one of them shouted. "They can't have gone far!" Khalid felt a surge of fear. They were closing in, and he had to think fast. "We need to find a way to get to the road," he whispered to Layla. "If we can reach the main road, we can flag down a car for help." "Okay." She nodded, her eyes wide with determination. As they moved deeper into the woods, Khalid felt a mix of fear and resolve. He would do anything to protect Layla, even if it meant facing the men head-on. They had come too far to turn back now. After what felt like an eternity of running, Khalid and Layla finally reached the edge of the woods. The moonlight illuminated the main road ahead, and Khalid felt a flicker of hope. They were close to safety. "Stay low," he instructed, glancing around to ensure the coast was clear. The sounds of the men searching for them faded into the distance, but Khalid knew they couldn't let their guard down just yet. They crept toward the road, the gravel crunching softly beneath their feet. Khalid's heart raced as he scanned the horizon for any sign of an approaching vehicle. "We just need one car," he murmured, more to himself than to Layla. Suddenly, headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the road ahead. Khalid raised his hand, waving frantically. "Stop, please," he shouted, his voice hoarse from the adrenaline and fear. The car slowed, and Khalid felt a surge of hope. As it came to a halt, he rushed to the passenger side, pulling Layla with him. The driver, a middle-aged man with a concerned expression, rolled down the window. "What's going on? Are you two okay?" "Please, we need your help," Khalid pleaded, glancing back toward the woods. "We're being chased. Can you take us to the police station?" The driver hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "Get in." As they climbed into the car, Khalid felt a wave of relief wash over him. They were finally safe, or so he thought. The driver pulled away from the curb, and Khalid turned to Layla, who was visibly shaken but trying to hold it together. "Are you okay?" he asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm scared, Uncle Khalid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if they find us?" "They won't," he assured her, though doubt gnawed at him. "We're going to the police, and they'll protect us." As they drove, Khalid couldn't shake the feeling that they were still in danger. The men could be anywhere, and he had no idea how far they would go to find Layla. He glanced at the driver, who seemed oblivious to the tension in the air. "Do you know the way to the police station?" Khalid asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yeah, I know it well," the driver replied, his eyes focused on the road. "You two look like you've been through hell. What happened?" Before Khalid could respond, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The driver's eyes widened in alarm as he glanced in the rearview mirror. "What was that?" Khalid's heart sank as he turned to look. A dark SUV was tailing them, its headlights glaring like a predator stalking its prey. "They found us!" he shouted, panic rising in his chest. "Step on it!" Khalid urged the driver, his voice urgent. "We need to lose them!" The driver pressed the accelerator, and the car surged forward, but the SUV was relentless, gaining on them with every passing second. Khalid felt a surge of desperation. They couldn't let the men catch them now, not after everything they had been through. "Hold on!" the driver shouted as he swerved onto a side road, trying to shake the SUV. Khalid gripped the seat, his heart racing as they bounced over uneven terrain. "Uncle Khalid!" Layla cried, her voice filled with fear. "What are we going to do?"
Just stay calm, Layla. He's trying to keep his own fear at bay. We'll find a way out of this. The SUV followed closely, its engine roaring as it pursued them through the winding roads.
Khalid could see the men inside, their faces twisted with determination. They were not going to let Layla escape. "Take the next left," Khalid shouted, pointing ahead. The driver obeyed, and they veered onto a narrow dirt path that led deeper into the woods. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" the driver asked, glancing nervously at Khalid. "It's our only chance," Khalid replied, his heart pounding. They needed to create distance between themselves and the men. As they sped down the dirt path, branches whipped against the car, and the sound of the SUV's engine grew fainter. Khalid felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could lose them in the woods. But just as he thought they were safe, the driver slammed on the brakes, sending them lurching forward. "What's wrong?" Khalid asked, panic rising in his chest. "There's a tree down in the road!" the driver exclaimed, his eyes wide with fear. They had come to a sudden stop, and the SUV was still pursuing them, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. "Get us out of here!" Khalid shouted, his heart racing. He could hear the roar of the SUV's engine growing louder as it closed in on them. "Back up," Khalid urged, but the driver was frozen in place, staring at the fallen tree blocking their path. "Now!" Khalid yelled, and the driver finally reacted, throwing the car into reverse. They sped backward, but the SUV was relentless, its headlights illuminating the night as it barreled down the dirt path toward them. "Hold on!" the driver shouted as he swerved to the side, trying to find a way around the tree. Khalid felt the car lurch, and he glanced back to see the SUV gaining ground. "Faster!" Khalid urged, his heart pounding in his chest. He could see the men inside the SUV, their faces twisted with determination. They were not going to let Layla escape. Just as they managed to maneuver around the tree, the SUV roared past them, the driver's side window rolling down. One of the men leaned out, a gun in his hand. "Stop right there!" he shouted, his voice filled with rage. "Go, go!" Khalid yelled, and the driver slammed on the gas, sending them flying down the dirt path. The SUV swerved to follow, but Khalid could see that they were losing ground. "Where do we go?" the driver asked, panic evident in his voice. "Just keep driving. We need to find a place to hide," Khalid replied, his mind racing. They had to find a way to escape, to protect Layla from the men who were determined to drag her back into her mother's past. As they sped through the woods, Khalid spotted a small cabin in the distance, half hidden by the trees. "There! Pull over!" he shouted, pointing toward the structure. The driver obeyed, and they skidded to a stop in front of the cabin. "What now?" he asked, glancing nervously at the approaching headlights of the SUV. "Get inside," Khalid ordered, grabbing Layla's hand and pulling her from the car. They rushed toward the cabin, the sound of the SUV's engine growing louder behind them. Inside, the cabin was dark and musty, filled with the scent of damp wood. Khalid quickly closed the door behind them, locking it just as the sound of the SUV's tires screeched to a halt outside. "Do you think they saw us?" Layla whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," Khalid replied, his heart racing. "We need to find a way to defend ourselves, just in case." He scanned the room, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. In the corner, he spotted an old hunting rifle hanging on the wall. He rushed over, grabbing it and checking to see if it was loaded. "Uncle Khalid, what are we going to do?" Layla asked, her voice trembling. "We're going to wait for them to come in," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "And when they do, we'll be ready." As they crouched in the shadows, Khalid could hear the men outside, their voices low and menacing. "They must be in here somewhere," one of them said. "Search the cabin." Khalid felt a surge of fear, but he also felt a fierce determination. He would protect Layla at all costs. He glanced at her, and in that moment, he saw the strength in her eyes. She was scared, but she was also brave. "Remember, stay quiet," he whispered, positioning himself near the door, the rifle ready in his hands. The sound of footsteps grew louder as the men approached the cabin. Khalid could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat echoing the urgency of the moment. He had to stay calm, to think clearly. The door creaked open, and the first man stepped inside, flashlight in hand. Khalid held his breath, waiting for the right moment. The man scanned the room, his eyes narrowing as he took in the darkness. "Come out, Khalid! We know you're in here!" the man shouted, his voice dripping with malice. Khalid felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. He had to act. "Get back!" he shouted, stepping into the light with the rifle aimed at the intruder. The man's eyes widened in shock. "You think you can stop us?" he sneered, reaching for his weapon. "Don't move," Khalid warned, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "I'll shoot." 9, resolution, now a hook, 35, 39 minutes, 1,000 to 1,200 words. The standoff hung in the air, thick with tension. The man hesitated, his hand hovering over his weapon. Khalid could see the uncertainty in his eyes, and he knew this was his chance. "Get out of here," Khalid shouted, his voice firm. "You don't want to do this. Just leave us alone." The man's expression shifted, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "You think you can scare me? You're just a washed-up businessman." "Maybe," Khalid replied, his grip tightening on the rifle. "But I'm also a man who will do anything to protect his family. You don't want to find out what I'm capable of." Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside the cabin. Khalid's heart raced as he realized the other men were closing in. "You have one chance," he warned. "Leave now, or I swear I'll pull this trigger." The man's bravado faltered, and he took a step back, glancing toward the door. "This isn't over, Khalid," he spat. But he turned and bolted out of the cabin, disappearing into the night. Khalid stood frozen for a moment, the rifle still aimed at the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear the sound of footsteps retreating into the darkness, the men abandoning their pursuit for now. The adrenaline coursing through him began to fade, replaced by a wave of relief. "Uncle Khalid?" Layla whispered, her voice trembling. "Is it over?" He lowered the rifle, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "For now," he replied, turning to face her. But we need to stay vigilant. They might come back." Layla nodded, her eyes wide with fear, but also filled with admiration. "You were so brave," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Khalid felt a swell of pride mixed with protectiveness. "You're stronger than you think, Layla. We're in this together, and I'll always be here to protect you." They spent the next few hours in the cabin, listening for any signs of danger. Khalid kept the rifle close, ready to defend them if necessary. As the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still being hunted. But he also knew they had to find a way to escape this nightmare. When dawn finally broke, casting a soft light through the cabin windows, Khalid felt a renewed sense of hope. "We need to get to the police station," he said, glancing at Layla. "It's the safest place for us right now." "Do you think they'll help us?" she asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. "They have to," Khalid replied, determination flooding his veins. "We'll tell them everything, and they'll protect us." They left the cabin cautiously, scanning the area for any signs of the men. The woods were eerily quiet, and Khalid felt a sense of unease as they made their way back to the main road. As they reached the road, Khalid spotted a police car in the distance, its lights flashing. Relief washed over him. "Look, Layla! Help is here!" They rushed toward the car, waving their arms frantically. The officer inside noticed them and quickly stepped out, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady. "Please, we need help," Khalid said, his voice urgent. "We're being chased by dangerous men. They're after my niece." The officer's demeanor changed instantly. "Get in the car," he instructed, motioning for them to enter. "We'll get you to safety." As they climbed into the back seat, Khalid felt a wave of relief wash over him. They were finally safe. The officer radioed for backup, and Khalid explained everything that had happened, the threats, the men, and the danger Layla faced. "Don't worry," the officer assured them. "We'll take care of this. You're safe now." As they drove toward the police station, Khalid glanced at Layla, who was staring out the window, her expression a mix of fear and hope. "You did it, Uncle Khalid," she said softly. "You protected me." "I promised I would," he replied, his heart swelling with pride. "And I always will." When they arrived at the police station, Khalid felt a sense of finality. They were no longer running. They were taking a stand. As they entered the building, he knew they would face whatever came next together. Days turned into weeks as the police investigated the threats against Layla. With Khalid's help, they uncovered the truth about her mother's past and the dangerous men who had been after her. The police were able to apprehend several members of the organization, bringing a sense of closure to the chaos that had engulfed their lives. One evening, as they sat together in the living room of the Al-Farouk estate, Khalid looked at Layla, who was now smiling and laughing, her spirit slowly returning. "You know, I never thought I could be so brave," she said, her eyes sparkling. "You are brave, Layla," Khalid replied, his heart full. "You faced your fears and came out stronger. I'm proud of you." As they shared stories and laughter, Khalid realized that their bond had grown deeper through the trials they had faced. They were no longer just uncle and niece. They were allies, survivors, and a family forged in the fires of adversity. One evening, as they sat together in the living room of the Al-Farouk estate, Khalid looked at Layla, who was now smiling and laughing, her spirit slowly returning. "You know, I never thought I could be so brave," she said, her eyes sparkling. "You are brave, Layla," Khalid replied, his heart full. "You faced your fears and came out stronger. I'm proud of you." As they shared stories and laughter, Khalid realized that their bond had grown deeper through the trials they had faced. They were no longer just uncle and niece. They were allies, survivors, and a family forged in the fires of adversity. But even as they celebrated their newfound safety, Khalid couldn't shake the feeling that the past was still lurking in the shadows. He had learned that the world could be a dangerous place, and he was determined to protect Layla from any future threats. One afternoon, while they were going through some old family photos, Layla stumbled upon a picture of her mother Fatima, smiling brightly. "I wish I could have known her better," she said softly, tracing the outline of her mother's face with her finger. Khalid felt a pang of sadness. "She loved you very much, Layla. She wanted the best for you, and that's why I took you in. You are her legacy." "I want to make her proud," Layla said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to be strong like you, Uncle Khalid." "You already are strong," he replied, a smile breaking through his serious demeanor. "And you have the power to shape your own future. Just remember, you're never alone. I'll always be here for you." As the days turned into weeks, Khalid and Layla began to rebuild their lives. They found a rhythm, creating new memories while honoring the past. Khalid enrolled Layla in a local school where she thrived academically and socially, making friends and finding her place in the world. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Khalid turned to Layla. "You know, I've been thinking about your future. Have you ever considered what you want to do when you grow up?" Layla looked thoughtful for a moment. "I want to help people, Uncle Khalid. I want to make a difference in the world, just like you did for me." Khalid felt a swell of pride. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Layla. You have the strength and the heart to make a real impact." As they sat together, Khalid felt a sense of peace wash over him. They had faced darkness together, but now they were stepping into the light. The bond they had forged was unbreakable, and he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But just as he began to relax, his phone buzzed with a notification. He picked it up, his heart sinking as he read the message. It was from the police department, informing him that some members of the criminal organization had been released on bail and were still at large. "Uncle Khalid?" Layla asked, noticing the change in his expression. "What's wrong?" He took a deep breath, trying to mask his concern. "It's nothing we can't handle, Layla. Just a reminder that we need to stay vigilant." As he spoke, he felt a sense of foreboding. The past was not done with them yet, and he knew that they would have to be prepared for whatever came next. "Promise me you'll always be honest with me," Layla said, her eyes searching his. "I want to know if there's danger." "I promise," Khalid replied, his heart heavy. "But I also promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world, Khalid felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would protect Layla at all costs, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. In that moment, he realized that their journey was far from over. The shadows of the past might still linger, but they had each other, and that was enough to face any storm that came their way. And as they sat together, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, Khalid knew that their story was just beginning. A story of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond between an uncle and his niece. But as the night deepened, a dark figure watched from the edge of the woods, a sinister smile creeping across his face. The game was far from over, and he would stop at nothing to reclaim what he believed was his. Khalid and Layla had won a battle, but the war was just beginning. The shadows were closing in once more, and they would need to be ready for the fight of their lives. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey of courage, family, and resilience. Khalid and Layla's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, love and determination can light the way. Their bond, forged through adversity, shows us the power of family and the lengths we will go to protect those we love. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more, Captivating tales filled with suspense, emotion, and unforgettable characters. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me, and by liking and sharing, you help spread the magic of storytelling to others. Stay tuned for more exciting adventures, and remember, every story has the power to inspire and connect us. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and I can't wait to share more with you soon.